2000, they tested to employ around 20 million people. So you can see that they grow over 300% in the past 2 decades. The scale of the industry again. It's estimated that 170 billion items of clothing were delivered worldwide out of factories in 2023. It's a rise from 90 billion in 2002. That's related to what I just said about the collections from the retailers where they produce. From 90 billion a year to 270 billion last year. Crazy the amount of clothing that we carry on producing. Please, next slide. And that brings us again to the workers. I just want to earn enough to feed my family, have a roof over us, and live in dignity. That's a Cambodian garment worker in one of the projects that Trade has with the Rainbow Collective, which is a recording and communication company that does documentaries about the conditions of these kind of garment workers in Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Next slide, please. That will bring us with this. What are the conditions of the garment workers? Well, we all know they're working very long shifts. We all know about child labor. We all know about slavery. And even sometimes we don't even know. We've got the brand, we know the reputation, and we don't think, as I said before, who has made our clothing, and which condition, and why can cost so cheaply. Why cost so cheaply? Due to my role, I speak with a lot of retailers. I met with Primark, I met with Shein, I met with Boohoo, I met with Arcadia back in the day, Debenhams, and my question is always the same. Why do you keep producing so much? And I know the answer, obviously, from a financial point of view, the more items I make, the cheaper it gets the garment. We all know that. But they don't take into consideration the impact. Why is that clothing so cheap? And I always give this example. We mentioned Cambodia and Bangladesh. In Bangladesh in particular, the children are going to the factories at a very early age. And the reason is the parents cannot afford to put them in a childcare center or a school. And you will say, well, the school should be compulsory and free. Well, it is if you have a birth certificate. The problem is those children cannot have a birth certificate because the parents cannot afford the cost of that paper. To give you an idea, that paper, that certificate costs 45 quid in Bangladesh. The average wages for a garment worker is 43 quid a month. So if they pay that, they don't eat. So what Trade did, we will talk about later about our projects, but basically we childcare centers to stop children going to the factory, to start working at an early age, providing with healthcare, education, and meals. Next slide, please. Plus image from the Rana Plaza disaster, where over 1,100 garment workers died after the building collapsed. And that brings us as well the conditions of the workers. Even though those workers in Dhaka, in the Rana Plaza factory, were with some unions and working the right number of hours, the right shifts and so on, the conditions at work were very poorly. They were not allowed to have toilet breaks. The doors were closed and shut from outside. They're locked inside. They cannot leave the building. A fire started on the building, then the building collapsed, and everyone was trapped inside. As I said, over 1,100 people died. The retailers that were in contrast with this factory in particular, still today have not paid the compensation to the families of the dead people in that factory. Some of them, they make a lot of advance, and again, we will talk later about this, like announcing how many garments, which is compulsory by law now, by the way, are producing per year. The only one, two minors that has make a report stating how much they make or how much they pay, and everything kind of crystal is thorough, but they are a bit tricky too, because they are not saying the number of garments, they say the number of tons or kilos of clothing produced, which again, we can have an estimation of 3 garments per kilo, but we still don't know how many they produce. And I was saying before, when I had to be the retailers, why are you producing so many? And I mentioned it was financial. And I said, but you know that there's a third, well, 34, 35% of your production is never sold. So you are producing it knowing that you are not going to sell it just for the sake of having a cheap garment. That's why when you go to the Shein website or Boohoo website, you go outfits for £4, £5. So every weekend you can change an outfit really. And I understand with the cost of living crisis, that would be pretty good if those garments were done in the right way. But because they are not, that's also creating even more hassle and more problems than before. Next slide, please. Another example, this is the Transing factory, also in Bangladesh, in which collapses too. 100 people died on this one. And the irony of that picture is that they use the fabric rolls they were producing in the factory to escape the factory at the time. Since those two tragedies happened, I must say the conditions have improved. But the problem is the fighting between governments. So you got the Bangladesh government, the Cambodian government, or the former Burma government, which now are making it even easier for retailers or producers to pay less money, less wages, less time, making it even cheaper to produce because they compete across the countries. So the factory might move year on year to different countries just to maximize benefits and profits. Again, irony, to escape on the item that you're producing. Please, next slide. And now that brings us to the environmental impact of the fashion. We discussed a little bit about the workers, and we'll talk later about the projects, but now it's the environmental. The fashion industry has the fourth largest environmental impact after transport, housing, and food. Total greenhouse emissions from textile production are 1.2 billion tons, which is more than maritime and shipping combined. That we need to think about it for a moment. You think about the number of ships that are on the sea on a daily basis, flights, planes, and shipping is, and this fashion is even bigger impact also combined that tell us again that there's something is not right. I'm not going to give you an example. We will talk later about the water. Any of you know how many liters of water it takes to make one cotton t-shirt? Any guess? 100? Any other guess?
A swimming pool's worth.
A swimming pool.
I don't know how many.
A bit less than that. I can tell you this about 2,000 liters to make one cotton t-shirt. That's from the moment that we grow the cotton to the spinning mills, dyeing, and so on. The whole process is 2,000 liters of water. Drinkable water. So when we think about natural resources and the limitation of them, and then we know, we all can see in our wardrobes and drawers how many t-shirts do we own, multiply that across the globe, and you think, oh my God, how many liters of water are being used to produce t-shirts in many different ways. Just to give you this kind of a start, when you go to the shop again and you need to buy a t-shirt, to be a bit more conscious about what kind of t-shirt we buy, how long will it last us, how many washes can take. Because sometimes to buy a t-shirt that costs £1-2 is more expensive than a t-shirt that costs £6 in terms of lasting washes and so on. Globally, the fashion industry is estimated to use 79 billion cubic meters of water every year, and this is set to rise 50% by 2030. And some of you might be thinking, okay, but we've got an agenda, we've got some targets for 2030, 2040, 2050. Well, if we carry on producing the clothes that we produce at the pace that we do it today, that's what it's going to be. So we are very far off from any of the targets that have been set up by United Nations in Sustainable Goals, European legislation, UK legislation, you name it. We are very far from it. And then you got the example, one cotton t-shirt uses around 2,500 liters of water to produce, which will take us, an adult, 5 to 6 years to drink. Just for one t-shirt. Please, next slide. And that's why the linear system of clothing or production that we have today, fiber production, clothing production, use after use. This is the business model that has been out there for the past 30, 40 years. It's really a business model on steroids, the weight of consumption and production multiplied by 1,000, with no much consideration on recycling and reusing. Thanks God, recently, in the last few years, we're having some schemes, policies that can help us to get to that point. But in UK in particular, we are quite far from it. We still don't have an extended person responsibility for textiles, like it's been implemented in France or very compulsory in Europe from end of this year. We just implemented for packaging, which has to do with clothing, but it's with fashion because of the parcels. So what will EPR will mean on this? It will mean that the producers of clothing, the retailers, will need to pay a levy per garment produced. That could be 1 pence, 2 pence, whichever is being agreed. And that money will go into a pot. And that pot will be split across the stakeholders within the industry, from collectors, repairers, reusers, recyclers, you name it. So that will help to get some funding to develop technology that help us to recycle the textiles. Currently, as I said, there's things going on, don't get me wrong, but we're very far from achieving anything really sustainable. Please, next. An example of water production, that's the RLC. The RLC in mid-Asia, what was the biggest natural lake in the world. And you can see since 1977 till 2013, the evolution of the water and how it dried out, mostly from agricultural for cotton and for the textile industry, but also from farming. Please, next slide. And that's how it looks like today. There are even though, again, a bit of irony, there is a festival going on every year on that desert in which they claim for rain and water to go back. So they've got a series of gigs, concerts, and so on, claiming the water that has been used for the past 30 years. And that's the impact of human being, fashion, and industry. Please, next slide. That brings us to production and consumption. And that's very interesting topic. Clothing production more than doubled between 2005 and 2019. In the UK, between 2012 and 2019, clothes consumption increased by 220,000 tons. I mentioned earlier, we produce over 100 billion garments per year. If you think what we say today was 70 million 10 years ago. In UK, is the biggest consumption country in Europe by far. We are the country that buy more clothing than anybody else in Europe. But not only that, we double the second country in buying clothing. So we are a country that really consume a lot. In 2019, UK households spent 60 billion of clothing, which is 50% of their spending. And I can tell you that RAP put a report in which it says that the average expenditure on clothing in UK per household is 4.5K per year. That's equal per person. I think it's estimated about 46, 47 garments per year. And Trade did a campaign a few years ago, was called a 23% campaign, because we make a study with YouGov and some other companies in which we find out that 23% of the garments that we own, we have not worn them in over a year. And I could not believe it. Yeah, so I went home and I checked my wardrobe and I started pulling things that I even remember I had. So I account for 25% myself. But I asked my wife, can you do the same, please? She did the same. And it was even worse. It was 28% of the garments never used. That was in 2019. Last year campaign, we have to call it 26% campaign. Because in the last 4 years, 5 years, we've increased that. So that's what we call it the Clear Your Closet campaign, which we'll talk about it later a little bit as well. But to tell you that the consumption in UK, in particular with clothing and fashion, is huge. Please, next slide. And what happens with consumption? Waste. In the UK, we send over 300,000 tons of clothing to landfill every year, of which we believe 40% of that will be in reusable, rewearable condition, which equals to about 140 million pounds. That's only clothing. If we talk about textiles, it's close to 1 million tons per year going to landfill. And I know that maybe those numbers, they are too big to assimilate or to visualize, but if I can tell you that 300,000 tons of clothing, you think about a Ford Transit van, any kind of normal standard van, full of clothing, dropping the contents in landfill every second, that's what's happening in this country. Think about it. A van, every second or two, unloading the whole content of clothing in landfill. That doesn't even include what we capture. As Trade, charity collector, or any other private collectors, we try to capture as much as possible. That's the one that goes on the waste stream because public are putting on their black bins. Crazy, isn't it? We were close to an average for 7 times before we discarded them. Obviously, before was about 12, 13 times, but with fast fashion coming in and ultra fast fashion coming in even more recent times, it's dropping. And I believe the new studies will be close to 4 or 5 times. Because, and I'll tell you why, I spoke with the Fashion Retail Academy in November last year, a few months ago. And this all Gen Z, people from 16, 17 to 22, 23 years old. And the study that just came recently about that particular age group is that they buy a garment or two quickly on the apps, Shein, Misguided, the Boohoo, and so on. And they discard it after one wear. They don't know where their awareness, this education, they know, but they're still doing it. So something is not right. The message that we're passing is not right, and we need to make actions to fix that. And as I mentioned before, 26% of London's clothes are unworn, which equals to about 123, 124 million pieces clothing in our wardrobe that we have not worn. Please, next slide. Well, bring us, right now, there are enough clothing on this planet to dress the next 6 generations. That's done by British Fashion Council report. What does it mean? It means if today, as right now, we stop every factory producing clothing, We don't produce anything else. There is enough clothing produced in the country, in the world right now to wear people for the next 20, 25 years. That's how much we are producing. That's how much we will produce. That's how much we will consume. Again, we are not advocating and saying to people, you should not buy new garments. We are not saying that. What we're saying is, it is all more rational in the way that you buy your clothing, that you need to make some assessment and try to find out how that clothing were made, how long will it last me, how many washes can have. And for that reason, there is so many policies that are going to be implemented, like an ID per garment. You'll have a QR code in which you can have scan it and have a look and see the whole information about the garment. Who did it? Where? When? How long it took? How many washes can it have? And when I pass it on to a charity or someone else, you can record it too. So when you go to a charity shop, or second hand, or Vinted, or Depot, or whichever it is, and you get that garment, you just scan it, you will see, okay, 3 people had it before me. This has already, God knows how many washes. It's still in good condition. That tell me that probably is a good assessment. Probably can buy that garment. So that's what we are advocating for. Please, next slide.
Sorry.
No worries.
I think that might have.
And that brings us to Trade. Who are we and what do we do? Trade is a charity that born in 1999. So last year was our 25th anniversary. We were the first charity in UK that got the fashion impact on environment and people as charitable objective. Thanks God, there's a lot more NGOs and charities now with the same charitable objectives, but we were the first one, I need to say. And today, we have put 228 million garments back to use in our charity retail. So we work with local authorities, we work with private businesses, with community groups and associations, trying to encourage the donation of clothing so we can resell, recycle, and raise funding for our international projects. How do we do that? Please, next slide. We do via home collections, textile banks, and retail. Home collections is a bespoke service that we launched in 2014 to make the donation of clothing as convenient as it could be. Basically, you can book a collection over the phone, online, or via email, and based on your postcode, the system or the attendee will give you a day and a slot time for your collection. A day that suits you and a time that suits you. Our driver will knock on your door and the resident will handle the bag. Like face-to-face interaction. Second way, textile banks. We've got a network of 700 textile banks, of which 95% of them are based within Greater London. We work with 23 local authorities out of the 32 in London for textile collections. And this is our main bread and butter. To give you an idea, home collections, we collect last year 761 tons of clothing. Textile banks, almost 3,000 tons of clothing. And soft donations to the counter, like a standard donation at charity shop, that's 150. What is the difference about it? So I will tell you in a minute. One is face-to-face interaction. Face-to-face interaction, textile banks is anonymous. What happened with that? Contamination. People are using the textile banks as a drop-off point for waste. And when we go into the sorting, I can give you some examples, but basically we found all kinds of things. From organic rubbish, organic waste, dropped in our textile banks, dead pets, being checked in there, sexual toys, alive pets, what you name it. Whatever it is, we find a lot of stuff. Well, what is the problem? They contaminate the whole clothing donated to us with willing for us to reuse or recycle. Please, next slide. And then is the question, what happened with the clothing that we collect? No matter the source, textile banks, home collections, or shop donations, every single garment goes to a warehouse. We used to be based in Wembley for 24 years. We moved just last September to Alberton with a brand new warehouse, much bigger. Our USP for Trade is that we hand sort every single garment collected. Why I emphasize on this point? Because the majority of collectors, I'm not going to say all of them, but the majority, private or charities, they rely on the wholesale market. The wholesale market, I'm sure you all seen in the news, on social media, pictures and videos of the Ghana market, the Kenya markets, the shores, the Chilean desert, full of clothing that's discarded as waste. Well, that's what happened with the wholesale market when you don't hand sort previously. But I need to make a point in here. Most of the times, the customer, the buyer, overseas demands that the clothing is untouched, the donations are untouched, because they believe that what they call the cream, what they call the good clothing, the top quality clothing, is going to be removed before it reaches their country. So they want to see everything, the good and the bad, in the bags. It's called original in the industry, when it's untouched. Majority of the collectors in UK and in Europe, they sell original products, which brings the problem of passing the waste somewhere else. Instead of dealing with the waste here, we just pass the waste there. We give them the good product to raise money and also the bad product. And because they cannot afford the disposal cost, and sometimes there's not even a structure to dispose those garments end up in landfill. That's why for trade it's key that we are able to hand sort every garment donated. And also for the public, because on my perspective, my experience, public believes that when you give a bag of clothing to Oxfam, to trade, to Salvation Army, to British Heart Foundation, to a SCORE, to any other charity, you think that that clothing is going to go to the person that really needs it. You think when you give to a homeless charity a bag of clothing, the charity will take that clothing and pass it on to the homeless. That's far from the reality. They use the clothing to raise income, which is fantastic. I have no issue with that. But public is misled. We are very clear. We want clothing to resell, so we can make money to pay our projects. But on top, we give clothing away to families in need, to refugees. We work with every local authority, and every time they ask us, we supply them. But we don't go there and say, give us clothing because we want to feel the homeless or we want to feel the hospices or whatever it is. And that's what happened. And that misleading misconception in the public, to me, is one of the big handicaps. Second handicap, local authorities. Not all of them. Why are they a handicap? Because they are not transparent on what happened with the textile collection services. To give you context, from next year in Europe will be compulsory, the specific collection of textiles across all the countries. UK has not signed it yet, but usually follows that kind of policy, so we can expect it to happen in the next 1 or 2 years. That textile collection is happening currently. And when you go to any council website, you might see what partner we collect, whatever. And it's textile bags placed on the public highway. What majority of the public don't know is that the council charges a fee per ton to the collector. So you're offering a service to the residents, you're offering a service to the community in collection, reusing, and recycling. And on top, I have to pay a fee to the local authority. Chiltern Chelsea doesn't have any fee. We're working with Chiltern Chelsea for the last 21 years in partnership. The relation is fantastic. I can give you a lot of councils that do. And it's a public tender. So, but the problem is they don't put it on the website. They don't say how much money they're getting from charities or private collectors to provide a service to the residents, unless you do a freedom of information request, in which they have to tell you to do privately. And again, one of my fights with the local authorities is be more transparent. Talk to your residents about how you do things, how we do things together, how much it costs us. I can give you an example, actual example. Trade to collect a ton via textile banks cost us £215. Then you need to add the sorting cost. Then you need to add the delivery cost, the manpower. So when people got the conception that a garment reached the charity shop is free, because it's been donated, far from reality. For trade, each garment that we put in the software costs us £1.86. So when we do our sales at £1.50, we're losing money, but we want to pass clothing on, sell as much as possible. But that's how much it costs charity like us to put one garment on the software, £1.86. That's pretty true. Please, next slide. So how do we sort? I mentioned the sorting. We're in 4 main categories. The first one is shop sellable, which help us to fill our charity shops. That's how we raise the income. I can tell you that last year we raised 8.2 million in 12 charity shops, based on some second hand, and then £800,000 on the wholesale market. We only sell to Lebanon and Sierra Leone, and as I said, this after sorting. And anyway, we audit them twice a year. They go to what we call Western-like shops. If you've been in Africa, in those markets, the majority of what we call shops could be stalled in the markets or could be big warehouses where they sell bales. East Africa, 45 kilos, West Africa, 55 kilos bales, in which you have no choice. You can get this bale of denim, and whatever is in there is in there. You cannot open it and check it. Okay? That for trade is £800,000. So that's the first category, shop sellable. Second category is the sorting, reusable. That's what we put for this wholesale market. Third category, recyclable. Clothing that cannot be bought again because they may be damaged, may be broken, can be repaired. So what we do, we supply a lot of community groups for repairing. We supply the London School of Fashion. We supply the Fashion Hotel Academy, St. Martin's, Imperial College, Brunel University, Salford University, Glasgow University, not only for the repair purposes, but also to practice technologies and techniques that can help us to achieve actual recycling of textile. Another category of sorting will be waste. Clothing that be contaminated, as I previously mentioned or explained, why it's contaminated with paint, oil, chemicals, you name it, that have to be disposed. We dispose it, we work with Veolia, with a compactor or whatever outside our warehouse, and that clothing goes for energy from waste, for incineration. So that's the main four categories that they sort the clothing for. Please, next slide. Our shops. We try to be as environmentally friendly as possible, using reclaimed wood, scaffolding, and other materials. We started with the scaffoldings back in 2008, when it was not very trendy. We were the first one putting scaffolding in our shops. And this is like a trend that I love, because we used to go to building sites. And are you finished? Can we get some scaffolding? They will give us scaffolding for free. Reclaimed wood, and so on. Now, some of the hooks or the lamp that you can see in there is made with reclaimed wood, but also with fabric. Because something that we have done, and I'm very proud of, last year we made a partnership with a company called Bright Recycling Solutions, which are based in Yorkshire. And these guys are able to achieve and do fabric bricks, which are being used in the insulation of buildings. So the textile is gets shredded, go into a process that they make a mix, and then it's compacted to make a brick. And that brick goes in between the walls when they make new construction on new sites, and it helps the insulation. So that's actual recycling. Something is the material to become something new at the end of life. Which brings another point when we're talking about the retailers earlier today. Designing is key. Why? And I keep telling them to all the students in the uni about it. When you design a garment today, you need to think about the end of life of that garment. What happens when it's not fit for purpose anymore? If this shirt or that jacket is not fit to be a jacket anymore, what can we do with it? How easy would it be to recycle? We've got metal zips, metal bottoms, where the fabric composition can be dismantled into different fibers, can become a shopping bag, can become a travel bag. How? When you go designing process in mind, then we really achieve circularity. Because that garment is not going to come to me to be treated or disposed. It's going to come to the factory that made it to make something new out of it. So we achieve circularity, which is what we're trying to do. Reduce waste and be more circular. So our shops are inclusive. We've got a big range of stock. Try to make fashion affordable for everyone. How we do that? Some people might think that our prices are a bit high. Sometimes they are, but we also have what we call our sale. Sales we're having 5 times a year for 3 weeks, so it's 15 weeks per year, in which all our garments go for £5, £4, £3, £2, and £1.50, as I said. So we give the opportunity to everybody to really shop with us and to shop second-hand. Please, next slide. And our projects, everything that we do, this is the main reason why we do things. So every time someone donates clothing to us, we stop items going for landfill or incineration while raising funds. Our projects prevent child labor in the textile worker communities, support children out of waste picking or going to the factory at early age, expanded Benin organic cotton sector, and pesticide-free in Ethiopia. And those two, the Ethiopia and the Benin, are our long-standing term projects. The Benin we started 9 years ago with only 10% of the farmers of cotton. There were a lot of poisonings because they were not trained how to use pesticides. So a lot of people died by misuse of the pesticides. And also there was the preconception back then that by growing organic, you don't produce or grow as much as growing with chemicals. Well, we've proven that we are able to produce more cotton being organic, less water use, less pesticides. So now 82% of the farmers in Benin are within trade and pesticide action network project. And Ethiopia, almost 50% of the farmers of cotton. And something that we're very proud as well of is women. Women farmers in those two countries were not allowed to be in unions or to join associations for farming. Thanks to our projects, they are, in fact, are the leaders of some of these projects. So again, advocating for women's rights and women opportunities in countries that sometimes they are not as free as they should. Please, next slide. Now, a bit of overview of the second-hand market. In 2023, the global market value second-hand and resale was estimated to be worth $197 billion. this value is projected to rise rapidly in the coming years and by another extra $100 billion in 2026. Again, we mentioned our targets, global targets that we all have. Every action that we can see is not going toward that. The second-hand market is impacted in both negative ways. Please, next slide. And what are the opportunities of becoming more environmentally friendly, push more second-hand? They can enhance their reputation. They can position themselves as leader in the economy. They can strengthen the customer loyalty. They can increase profit margins. But I must say, up to last year, all the big online second-hand retailers, they didn't make any profit. Depop, Vinted, all those, they were not making any profit. Even though we think they are huge, and they are, they start making profit that is projected from this year onwards, which is what we mean, this is trend. So how can we tell them to acquire new customers and to be more conscious? But we need to be very careful about the greenwashing. Yeah? So many retailers are using these schemes to just pass a message that is far from the reality or from the truth. Please, next slide. The challenges, increasing the complexity. Why? Because second-hand garment is unique. We were talking about collections earlier. A collection is produced, so you might have 1 million units where it's exactly the same in different rates and sizes. Second-hand, every garment is unique. It's been produced previously, but when you reach a second-hand collector or reseller, you only got what you got. So this jacket or this is the only one I have. If someone wants to sell M, I don't have it. So that complexity of inventory and stock is one of the main handicaps that we also ourselves find. Even yesterday, we have a meeting with an electronic point of sale company because we want to measure and monitor the stock. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to know what you have. We can know the number of pieces, but if someone came to me and said, Jose, I really like that jacket. Do you have it in another color? We don't know. So it makes very labor intense. They're also very costly because you need to have people or systems in place that help you monitor what you got on the stock and struggling to take a profit. As I say, the ultra fast fashion means the consumer are offloading a lot more clothing constantly, but a very lower quality. And I'm going to give you an example that my self-experience. I used to be a store manager for the Shepherd's Bush store in trade 16 years ago. And I used to call to the warehouse, these are the picture there. And I used to say, can I have please 10 pair of Levi's jeans? Can I have Ralph Lauren, Lacoste? Again, they are selling brands, and I get them. Today, well, there's a massive decrease in the quality of the clothing that we receive. Full of fast fashion. Well, before you may have few Primarks, now the majority is those brands that I just mentioned constantly today. And then you cannot have the luxury anymore to say I want 10 pair of Levi's or I want 10 Ralph Lauren's or whatever. Or forget about it. You get them, but the quantity dropped dramatically. And it's because the majority of us will turn to fast fashion for being more affordable. Please, next slide.
I understand that the presentation was scheduled to be until 2:45. So if anyone online needs to leave, feel free. Also, if you have any questions that you haven't answered and want answered, feel free to put them in the chat if you're not able to stay, and we can cover them once you.
We're finished 2 minutes.
Yeah, that too. So if you can hang on for 2 more minutes, then you'll be fine.
So some of them are really embracing the second-hand market, and some examples in there. IKEA launched a dedicated second-hand platform for furniture, but also the fabrics that they use to make the couches or sofas and stuff. Canada Goose launched a dedicated second-hand platform. Zara, and that personally really impacted me because I met them in 2019 and I talk more than I should. And basically they copy a lot of our systems for collection and ideas, and they implemented themselves. Just fine, but they didn't let me know. And John Lewis with vouchers and H&M. So what I say, it's there. We know second hand is appealing. We know it's getting trendy. So we need to be really grateful that these big companies start pushing for second hand. But as I said before, we need to be very careful and read the small print because we don't know exactly what they want. Next slide, please. And that's pretty, I think it's the last one, isn't it?
I think.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and that's pretty much. Well, that's a video from the campaign that we launched. I think you can click play.
Is that gonna? I don't know if it's gonna play the sound. I will. I'll share the link with everyone so that
It's a campaign in which we, yes, in a minute and a half, explains what I've been talking about in detail and encouraging Londoners to pass on the clothing they no longer wear when they go and buy their serious. And the next slide, you can see some of the celebrities that worked with us last September, like Sophia Ellis-Bextor, one of the face of the campaign, and a lot of famous people, again, trying to encourage all of us to be more sustainable in our choices and to pass the clothing now we no longer wear. And that's me. I don't bore you no more. I've been talking quite a lot. But also, please, any questions? I'm more than happy to answer. So thank you very much. Yes.
When that happens, because I find that a lot of that can have an impact to a lot of inventory, stock management, but also like your profits, I guess. But how, in terms of exposure with brands, I assume that change really helped.
Yes, it did help. We thought that we really need to have to refresh it.
Yeah.
So we have changed the branding twice. Since 1999, the first one was in 2009, and then 2019 now, 2024. So 15 years the same branding. So we thought it was time to have a new look. We started using the pink and yellow colors back in 2016-17, much bright, much catchy. So now our bands are very bright and catchy. And really helped us in terms of connection. Well, it helped to get more, put us more out there. And the campaign I just mentioned, the Clean Your Closet, was an amazing campaign in September. The repercussion social media and new partners, new leads, more awareness, it was there. I must be honest, we're still in the process of changing the whole thing because we need to change every asset. So we have just changed the signs from most of the shops, but not all the shops yet. Some of the vehicles, not all, because we keep renewing the fleet. So now we're looking into electrical vehicles. Once we got them, we need to go with the new branding. So probably we'll see all our new mixing up on the streets currently. All the textile banks to change, as you mentioned, the cost to change all these is huge. So we established 2-3 years transition period from point A to point B to finish the whole rebranding. But it really helping us a lot in be more out there. Yes.
Jose, what kind of things would you suggest like everyday people can do to help these situations? I mean, obviously there's blogging, there's, sharing posts, but I mean, I know you can write letters to government and things, but what would you say on your?
I think the small actions that you can do individually and in your household helps a lot when it expands. You mentioned government. In 2018, we were part of the Environmental Audit Committee in Parliament. And Trade was one of the leaders on that. And we make 18 points letter that was backed up by so many MPs. When it went to the vote, it didn't pass a single point. And then it seems to be very successful. We're all very happy it will happen. It did not happen. Policy are there. It will come at some point, sometimes a bit faster, sometimes a bit slower. But small actions, like I said, wear second hand or try to buy a bit more second hand. And for that reason, I always say there's a pledge. You can pledge, I'm going to buy 20% of my clothes second hand next year. Why I'm saying 20%? Because someone that pledged 90, 100 is already being converted, that people already done what he can. But someone that pledged 10 or 20%, maybe someone hasn't considered wear second hand. So if you already start doing that, it's less new garment that you buy. So that's a fair action. Pass on the clothing you no longer wear. Wear your clothing for longer. It's been proven that if you wear your clothing an extra 6 to 9 months, you're already saving your carbon footprint in 25 to 30%. So those little tiny actions that we all can do with no much effort, when you make it a bigger scale, the impact is there. So that would be my advice.
And what about, sorry for, is it 16 to 22-year-olds you said?
Yes, the Gen Z.
Yeah. So if Trade went into schools and started communicating secondary schools, would that be?
We are.
Yeah.
We've got the education department, we visit the schools, we do presentation from Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and colleges and university. And we saw that there is the awareness, there is the willing to do. But at the same time, and I sympathize somehow. If my budget is 10 quid a week to spend, and I want to buy something new to get to my friends and have a cinema or whatever, I don't want to spend the 10 quid on a jumper. So that's the answer they give me when I ask the question. Jose, I go to my phone, 2 quid tomorrow, I got a brand new top. Meanwhile, I say, well, you can do that sometimes in charities. Yeah, but it might not be fashionable, might not be the right color, might not be find the right size. Meanwhile, in here, in 2 scrolls, I got what I want, like this, and a very high price. So this Levi I mentioned in EPR, these rational orders, production prices from retailers, all combined effort, I think we're going to achieve it. Individually, very few things can do.
Jose, sorry, I'm
No, please.
interested in your experience when you went into universities that are their whole next trajectory of 3 years of study is going to be on designing clothes, but the fact remains of 6 generations of clothing exists that they probably don't need to do that degree.
Yeah.
What is your experience when you do speak on these statistics? What's the return of students? Like, I'm not asking you do they then decide to like leave uni that day, but is there a kind of
How an amazing question. And I'm gonna tell you, the last couple of years, the most common answer I'm receiving is, I'm gonna make a collection from our already produced material. Instead of producing a brand new fabric or brand new material, I'm gonna use what is out there. So we open our warehouse to all of the designers that come to our warehouse. They can go through the trolleys, what we call reject or recyclable. They pick up whatever they want and they make a collection out of those garments. And the ones that want to use new virgin materials or raw materials, they are considering the end of life, as we mentioned earlier. What can happen afterwards? What kind of composition is in the material they want to use? Do I have polyester, polyurethane, cotton, silk, cashmere, whatever it is? What will be most convenient for the end of life? So they're shocked about it, but at the same time, they try to find a solution of how to carry on producing, how to carry on with trends, fashion, and so on, but in a more sustainable way.
I noticed you mentioned the composition of clothes, and I feel like that can be quite a difficult thing because you talked about the water consumption of cotton, and that's a huge issue. But a lot of conversations are about microplastics and the fact that
Yes,
the
as well.
washing of our clothes and the production of synthetic clothes is basically the biggest source, or one of the biggest sources. I think fishing's also up there.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that? Like I try to mostly buy when I'm buying new organic fabrics because I'm worried about microplastics, but I know that cotton, for example, is so water intensive.
Yes.
What would you encourage people to do when buying virgin clothing?
Well, try to get as much information as possible of how that clothing was produced, where supply chains. I know it's tricky to find all this.
Yeah.
But with the transparency that the retailers now have to publish how they do things, where is the cotton being produced? For example, if it's grown in Benin, but then goes to Bangladesh to be spun, dyed, and so on, the spinning mills. Then it goes to Turkey to be manufactured. Then it goes to England to go the final taxes, and then it goes to the highest. If we can sort that supply chain, that whole process, that will help. It will help to produce less. So the retailers need to start producing a lot less than they're producing right now. That comes with a financial impact. We all know, probably an increase of prices on the final garment. But it's all about produce less, consume less, and reuse a lot more, I would say. But it's very complex question because, like you said, there's too many other variables like microfibers, chemicals, and so on using this. 100%.
Like obviously it's growing as exponentially, isn't it? But at the same time, there's a lot of borrowing and swapping and like vintage and kind of rental sites for clothing, or like higher end anyway, that are really booming. Like vintage is a huge thing now, I guess.
But I say it hasn't made a profit yet, but this is huge. I'll give you an example. If you go to Vinted yesterday, I think it was 57 million garments from Shein
Yeah.
on Vinted alone yesterday.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a good tool. Don't get me wrong. Rental
But it's not
is too. Rental is a few studies that came out last year saying it's not environmentally sustainable for many different reasons. I can disagree with that. The good thing is a lot of actions, there's a lot of new schemes that are out there to try to maximize the problem of production and consumption. Another issue that we have, Vinted and Depop, now they need to pass on the tax to the taxman. They need to report to the taxman how many garments I sold. And if I reach a threshold, I need to pay taxes on that too. Unless there's a garment that's already been paid, brand new. So I'm still a bit confused exactly about how that will play out, how they will monitor that. Will impact the final individual. If I sell 15 garments and I make £1,000, will I have to pay this tax? That will stop me from selling second hand and put second hand back on the market. At the same time, will help the charity to collect more clothing for resale and raise income. So I'm in a position, to be honest with you, that I still don't have very clear.
So really the best kind of local, like individual or kind of local collective impact that you can have is by sharing within that local
Yes,
area.
by far.
So if we were to do something here in like West, it would be about what can we collect and redistribute hyper locally,
Yeah.
In fact-
and fix and repair at the same time.
In fact, now most local authorities with many different projects are looking into that. A circular economy local, which is who produce the clothing, who buy them, who collect them, who recycle them, and who resell them, all in the same community. So you go to the Royal College of Art in Wandsworth with the Textile Sustainability Project, UKFT, all those are looking into those models, projects which are community projects in which they generate and distribute the whole resources and tasks to achieve zero waste or circularity.
Wonderful. I just wanted to make sure, excuse me, make sure that no one online had any questions. And if not, I will close this meeting for online. Thank you also, Arona, but you can, if you, we can ask more questions and we're going to go into the workshop here. So if there's no questions online, which I don't think there is, then I'll say thank you very much for attending. I will circulate a recording of this session and the slides for the session with all the attendees. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.